This is the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast, session number 425. 4 Hypnotic Opinions Changed.
Welcome to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast with Jason Linett, your professional resource for hypnosis training and outstanding business success. Here's your host, Jason Linett.
Hey, it's Jason Linett, and we're about to dive into 4 topics that might be a little taboo, might be a little questionable, and chances are, for some of you, the opinions that I'm about to share may challenge some of what you believe, may definitely challenge some of what you've learned, because I've got to simply tell you that in the years that I've been doing hypnosis, in the 8 or 9 years I've been doing this podcast, and really the result of seeing thousands of clients, training thousands of students around the world, well, simply put, some of the belief systems that I had around hypnosis at the beginning, well, they're very different right now than what they used to be. And the purpose of this is to help those of you that are perhaps kind of struggling in some of the work that you do to look at it from a slightly different perspective. But then again, on the other side of things, it's to challenge some of what you may hold dear and may not necessarily have a model to then prove upon your old belief systems. And likewise as well, some of you out there are completely brand new to hypnosis. And if that's the case, some of these things were the ones that, I'll admit, kind of held me back at some point. So we're about to dive specifically into these 4 hypnotic opinions that changed over time. And you can check out the show notes of this week's episode by going over to worksmarthypnosis.com/425. That'll bring you directly over to the show notes. And while you're there, I'm going to tell you the quick story of an email that I received a few days ago. The question was, Jason, do you publish your stop smoking protocol? And the official answer is that stop smoking is one of the most common things that I do. However, I don't actually have a published program for anything because I kind of stepped into a different way of thinking about hypnosis a number of years ago. And it was to stop thinking of every single category as being unique from each other. So instead, to look at all of the tools inside of the hypnotic toolbox and really understand this method for change, here's what that accomplishes. That method for change, here's what that accomplishes. And when you approach the hypnotic change work from the right perspective, every single method becomes universal in its approach, and you completely eradicate the old game of, I need a script for this, I need a script for that, or even if you're beyond that part of the conversation, this belief system that any one specific category needs to be different from the others. Right there. Okay, so I guess it's officially 5 different hypnotic opinions that are changed. This is where if you head over to hypnoticworkers.com, you can see the whole philosophy of not only how I produce change, but a complete roadmap step-by-step of how to go about doing it. Hypnotic Workers solves the problem of what to say, how to say it, and as well as the how and the why of all the various strategies of hypnotic transformational change work. Not only getting real client demonstrations, but also walkthroughs of meticulous techniques you will not find anywhere else. Check that out. You can get started for a low price today over at hypnoticworkers.com. And with that, let's dive directly in. Here we go. Session number 425. This is 4 hypnotic opinions changed. And we are going to dive right in because the belief system that changed first was that the hypnotic state was a delicate state. And we're going to set aside the 2 opposing theories. One would be a state-based way of looking at hypnosis. One would be more of a psychologically induced and conditioned state of hypnosis. Really, for both of them, this applies, which is the fact that the hypnotic state is not as delicate as you would often think it to be. And this is where, over the years, I've had a variety of things happen during sessions that sometimes I wish I was clever enough to make some of these things up, whether it was loud construction going on outdoors, whether it was the threat of aftershocks of a earthquake. Yeah, that happened back in 2011 in Virginia. Whether it was loud noises in the hallway or UPS drivers banging on the door. But this also goes in hand with everything that we're aware of now with doing our sessions online. And this discovery that the same set of suggestions you could use to create the hypnotic process actually are the same hypnotic suggestions that bring people right back into it. I cannot tell you how shocked I was the first time I realized that sometimes all you had to say was close your eyes and go back to where we were before. And holy crap, it actually worked. So be aware of the fact that it's not that delicate. And I'd kind of throw in a bit of a bonus for this one here, which is that, well, two of them. First of all, it's only a mistake if you say whoops. And second of all, it came about to that understanding that sometimes, as the new student of hypnosis is getting accustomed to the work and becoming familiar with the process, there's often that moment where they're catching that, oh, I didn't do that technique properly. I didn't do this sequence in the right order. And I'll just give you a rough example of here's the roadmap of a larger process that perhaps here was your intake. Here was your hypnotic induction. Here was then your deepening. Here was a moment of hypnotic phenomenon. Here was a moment of direct suggestion. Here was a moment of indirect suggestion. And then here was the anchoring. And then here was this emergence. And no, that's not my protocol for everything. I just strung a number of techniques together. You and I, as students, as practitioners of this work, can hear that and go, oh, I know those techniques. Hey, that's kind of a logical sequence. Cool. Put it to use. However, check this out. For the client, it was hypnosis. So again, keep that in mind, that it's a different train of thought for being the participant, for being the client of the work. And again, it's not as delicate as you would believe it to be. Second of all, of these opinions that changed over time, I can look back and I can understand this may ruffle some feathers, that there's sometimes this intention of making elements of the work seem a whole lot more complicated than it needed to be. Moments where I can even think down to the length of courses sometimes, which no, just because something was 3 days longer than another program doesn't necessarily mean it was better. I can think of a time that I took a 12-day event that was pretty good. It would have been a phenomenal 5-day event. And I can think of 2-day workshops that I went to that really could have been a 1-hour seminar at a conference. Yep, that happens. I've also had 20-minute conversations that changed everything that I do in my hypnotic work. So oftentimes there's this intention to overcomplicate for the sake of overcomplication, to make something seemingly more difficult as if perhaps sometimes, let's call this out, to brand it as if it was something brand new, when really instead it's coming back to the core linguistic patterns that make this hypnotic process work. So really, the second shift of opinion was that the work that we do at its core is a whole lot more simple than often we're led to believe it to be. And for those of you that have gone through either Hypnotic Workers or trained with me in real time with the Work Smart Hypnosis live events, it's the fact that every single method at its core can be dialed back down to simply pacing and leading. As this thing happens, that thing happens. As you focus on that feeling, you can follow it to the first time you felt that way. Hey, look at that. Regression is pacing and leading. As you focus on this inner conflict, you can become aware of that part of you that wants for things to move forward and that part of you that's holding you back. Hey, look at that. Parts therapy is pacing and leading. As you take a deep breath and relax, it helps you to go even deeper. Hey, the hypnotic induction is pacing and leading. So it's this lecture that one time had a student of mine say, Jason, somehow in the opening 30 minutes of class, you enhanced everything that I did in the hypnotic work. And you also ruined every other training I had been through up until then. And the intention of that was that he was putting all these different techniques up on a pedestal from the idea that this one's magic, this one's special, when really instead, once you understand the core linguistics, this is why we focus so much on how and why the methods actually work inside of Hypnotic Workers over at hypnoticworkers.com. You then know why it's working and not just, I've got these 3 sheets of paper. When I read it, people just overcome their fear of 3 sheets of paper that aren't printed on cardstock. Hey, let's move on to the third opinion that changed. And this is one that quite simply is, to be fair, the motivation as to why I recorded this week's episode. I changed the way that I do a hypnotic pre-talk about a decade, about 10, 12 years ago or so. And it was all about focusing on what is going to happen as opposed to what isn't going to happen. And buckle up for this one. I firmly believe that the hypnotic profession is further along in our everyday society than most practitioners in this industry believe it to be. I firmly believe that it's through the work of ineffective training, sloppy pre-talks, a lack of rapport, a lack of staying in their own lane and not going into the scenarios where we're practicing beyond things that are within our appropriate scope of practice, a variety of things that there's a number of people who do the work that we do professionally, and it's their opinions that are still kind of stuck in the dark ages. And I say that as I used to be involved with another organization at one point that seemed to always want to tell the story of they're out to get us, they're trying to shut us down, and some of the stories that were told by way of fear-mongering, well, could not be verified. And isn't that interesting? Set up a Google News alert. Just do a Google search for Google News alerts, and you'll see how to set up a Google News alert. And there's research that hits us every single week. There's news stories that are being published, the majority of which are wonderfully positive. As I had interactions with doctors and referral partners, it wasn't that, oh no, they see us as competition. No, it's because many people in this space had not yet done the appropriate work to educate and elevate the knowledge of exactly what we do. And again, back to the core of the pre-talk that I deliver, which, hey, was episode number 1 of this podcast series. It's still there. It's where you can find this moment of name another profession that's kicking off the work that they do by telling somebody, here's all the stuff that's not going to happen. Doesn't exist. So instead, here's what is going to happen. Here's what positive things you can expect. Step back and look at how far we've already come. The hypnotic profession is further along right now than it's been in really ever. And finally, for the opinions that have changed over time, I at one point was the person, like many of you, who was chasing the next certificate, changing the next document, changing the letters at the end of my name, and kind of related to the hypnotic profession being further along than where it really is right now. It's that the understanding is officially now the one thing that's going to grow this profession better and stronger than anything else is this appropriate grassroots movement of having more of us out there doing the positive work of hypnosis, spreading the good word in terms of what we do. And okay, I'm all about advocacy. I've done things for some of the hypnotic holidays that have been created over the years. Yet here's where we can catch in some of those moments. It's a lot of us engaging with our own stuff and not truly bringing in the public, the real people, the muggles as much as we should. So it's that ability where I can look at a client who I worked with this past week, and he was the direct referral of someone who I worked with at this point. It must have been 11 years ago, 12 years ago, perhaps. And as she's been out there for more than a decade telling the story as to how hypnosis changed her life, all these years later, she met a friend who had the same issue that she previously had, and there was that connection. Here was that referral. And the wonders of the online era. I'm working with him online this week once again because the process has a reason to continue onward. So it's to look at, oh, we need advocacy. Oh, we need to do these press releases, which, yes, those are great. I firmly believe in them. I teach how to do them inside of our Hypnotic Business Systems course at hypnoticbusinesssystems.com. More importantly, though, get out of your office, get out of your own space, get out into the world and work with the real people. That's what's going to move things further along than anything else. Hey, it's Jason Linett, and once again, thank you so much for leaving your reviews on this program, for sharing this in your social media channels. And once again, you can head over to the show notes for this week's episode over at worksmarthypnosis.com/425. This is episode 425. And while you're there too, check out hypnoticworkers.com. Dial in the exact how the techniques work and why they work to take everything that you approach in this hypnotic space, make it a universal strategy for change. That's how you build that unstoppable confidence. That's how you make the work exciting. That's how you become even more effective. Become a hypnotic worker by heading over to hypnoticworkers.com.
Thanks for listening to the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast at worksmarthypnosis.com.